Hey everyone, I wanted to talk today about Philosophy Tube's Cultural Marxism video that came out in 2016. I'm not sure if the views of Philosophy Tube have changed on cultural Marxism, but I think that the conclusions that are drawn in the video are similar to ones that I hear today being drawn, whether it be in offline spaces like the classroom or online spaces such as like YouTube podcasting. So we're going to start around 3 minutes or so because the first 2.5, 3 minutes is Philosophy 2 making the argument that Marxism, the term, is already vague itself because so many people ascribe Marxism or Marxist to their identity, and or yet they seem to have different theories in mind or different aims. So then around 3 minutes or so, Philosophy Tube talks about how adding cultural to Marxism makes it just more vague. But we're going to go through this video and I'm going to try to make an argument for why cultural Marxism is an okay title to use and one that, I actually might be comfortable with identifying as for myself. So here we go.
Cultural Marxism is associated with a group of academics who fled Germany during Hitler's rise to power for the USA, and who came to be known as the Frankfurt School. It included people like Theodor Arno and Max Horkheimer. They were living through a time of great social upheaval, so like Marx, they were interested in how social change happens, and they drew on his work as well as the work of a number of other famous thinkers. The Frankfurt School came to be seen as the centre of a secret plot to spread Marxist ideas, which came to be an even more vague term than it already is, throughout America in an attempt to destroy it. The idea was that rather than establish a revolution, these Marxist academics and their allies were secretly undermining American values from within, particularly in universities. How this idea of the secret plot arose is really fascinatingly odd. In 1992, an essay appeared in Fidelio, written by one Michael Minnesino. Minnesino's essay, which you can find a link to below, talks about a supposed link between the Frankfurt School and 60s counterculture, as well as Operation MK Ultra, which was an illegal CIA attempt to develop mind control, which it turns out was real, look it up, which Minnesino thinks helped popularize LSD, leading to a resurgence in the Frankfurt School's popularity, because anybody who took the Frankfurt School seriously has to be on drugs, right? Later in the 90s, an American
Yeah, so here I think the first thing that came to mind for me is that I think the more accurate analysis of like the link between Frankfurt School and 60s counterculture, if any correlation can be made, I think would be that it took 10, 15, maybe 20 years or so for the original Frankfurt School materials to actually be translated by American scholars, starting to get introduced into undergraduate or graduate seminars and whatnot.
right-wing thinker called William Lind tied Marxism to political correctness. In several speeches to the right-wing think tank Accuracy in Academia, Lind said that both Marxism and political correctness were totalitarian ideologies, infecting everything from universities to the media to even some of the clergy. He took what he saw as an
And here, I wouldn't say totalitarian, but I do think it's fair to say that there's a potential tie between the more cultural or discourse theory focused Marxists like critical race and gender theories and political correctness within universities, specifically like humanities-based education, arts, and now pop media.
encroaching sinister force from the left. Feminism, sexual liberation, challenges to religion, affirmative action, conversations about systemic racism, even environmentalism, not all of which have that much to do with Marx, put them all under the umbrella term cultural Marxism and tied it all back to the Frankfurt School, many of whom, he chooses to point out, were Jewish. Also tied up in this was Paul Weyrich, who helped found several influential conservative think tanks, including the Heritage Foundation, the American Legislative Exchange Council, or ALEC, and the very famous Moral Majority, which had as its head the late Reverend Jerry Falwell. All of these groups have shaped, and in Alec's case continue to shape, American politics. And Weyrich, like Lind, made this political correctness equals secret evil Marxist plot leap. So the use of
All right, and then here, I don't think it's that much of a leap. Like, definitely the anti-Semitic stuff and the sort of like, oh, they're Jewish and they're trying to undermine American values. Of course, that's a leap. But you can just look at previous statements from the original Frankfurt School thinkers about how they want to change ideology from within. And then you can look at humanities departments today and their syllabi, and you will see a clear Frankfurt School or second generation critical theory, like Birmingham cultural studies influence. And I'm not saying like people like Jordan Peterson or this Lynn guy or Waywork their depictions are correct, like I said, the anti-Semitic stuff is pretty insane. The way they correlate this practice with evil is ignorant and is partisan, and it's it's really, though, it's just political education with a Marxist analysis of class, capital, and culture. So to say that there hasn't been a deliberate theory-driven attempt by those cultural-focused people who refer to themselves as Marxists to instill a more socioeconomical and class-conscious focused ideology, to say that that's not happening, that would be an ignorant and partisan view as well, although, certainly not as sinister. All right, so let's see what else we got.
Of cultural Marxism as a kind of catch-all term for left-wing political ideas with sinister, conspiratorial, possibly Jewish origins has a rich and interesting history. Nowadays, variants of the idea are used by all sorts of people, including Pat Buchanan, the white nationalist groups Council of Conservative Citizens and League of the South, Norwegian terrorist Anders Breivik, anti-feminists. On Twitter, I've seen it used by Trump supporters, white supremacists, Gamergate supporters, anti-immigration people, anti-government types. Like Marxism proper, cultural Marxism, it seems, can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. Attaching the word cultural to Marxism makes the resulting term vague, but obviously negative. We should also note that
another thing I would definitely agree with, like, I get that a certain way it's said can be negative and malicious, like, oh, cultural Marxism. But the idea of cultural Marxism in general can be neutral. I think it simply refers to like a non-materialist or idealist Marxism focused on changing oppressive material relations first by changing ideology and gaining class consciousness, rather than material relations and the contradictions within forcing a change in ideology and leading to class consciousness, as the materialist might put it. I'm not sure exactly, but something close to that.
using cultural Marxist as a slur is obviously not engaging with any of the ideas behind Marx's work, or engaging with any of the ideas behind political correctness, if you use it as a synonym for that. Calling somebody a cultural Marxist seems a little bit like booing them. It's
And okay, here, like, yes, I would agree it's less iffy to connect political correctness to cultural Marxism. I would definitely have to look up more myself on the origins of PC, whether it stems from like academia or mass media or what. Probably more just like anti-capitalist hatred and wanting to, do something with that. Uh, but I can't quite concede that there isn't a legitimate phenomenon in academia and elsewhere that we might call cultural Marxism or culturally ideologically focused Marxist plan. Emphasis on plan, because I think plot sounds worse, especially when paired with evil. And quite frankly, I would be happy to take the label of cultural Marxist. I think political education is absolutely necessary to gain class consciousness, and providing a Marxist or Marxist-esque education doesn't mean anything is happening deceptively or maliciously. It's just one of the many ways to advance socialist Marxist ethical dreams of like a classless, stateless, moneyless society, all those cliches, to the extent that class, states, and money can be rid of as necessary. And keep in mind, like, just because that's the socialist Marxist end goal, stateless, moneyless, classless, that does not mean that like socialists or Marxists today are advocating policies right now that will destroy the state or money or classes. First and foremost, we care that everyone's material and psychological needs are being met, to the extent that such material and psychological satisfaction does not advertently or inadvertently take away from or hinder the possible material and psychological satisfaction of others. And if that means in an existing society run by nation states that we need to bolster the state to better represent masses of people, as well as to make sure masses of people don't take away from the marginalized or marginalized minority peoples, then you bet that we're going to advocate such state-related policies. Historical contingency and context matters. Thank you.